Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 31st of October 2012. My name is TotalBiscuit with 15 minutes of gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, revisions to Star Wars The Old Republic's upcoming free-to-play business model, Ghost Recon Commander has been cancelled, Primal Carnage releases on Steam, THQ struggling with Darksiders 2 revenue, Hawken's publisher raises $18 million, and Assassin's Creed 3's multiplayer microtransactions. As hopefully most of you are aware by this point, Star Wars The Old Republic is going free-to-play in possibly a record amount of time since launch, and there have been a number of issues regarding its actual free-to-play business model. Damien Schubert from BioWare Mythic went to the forums to talk just a little bit about a few of the changes, which include free-to-play players getting a second quick-slot bar, being able to do 5 war zones per week instead of 3, and the cartel coin item lock will be reduced across the board with a greater benefit to subscribers. Now, it should be noted that things like the second quick slot bar were initially part of so-called preferred status, i.e. being a subscriber. However, that has now been changed, basically due to player feedback. He went on to say that one of the golden rules is that the free-to-play experience should not cheapen the experience for paying subscribers. If it turns out that the free-to-play conversion results in a degraded Warzone experience once we go live for subscribers, you can rest assured that we will quickly make adjustments to the system to ensure that subscribers have an optimal experience. So, as you can clearly see here, they're going for the whole subscribers first and free-to-play players second-class citizen system. Now, this seems to be unreasonable, but you've got to think about the fact that this was not built with a free-to-play model in mind. This is very much the World of Warcraft model, down to the individual skills being identical in some areas. This is very much a WoW clone in perhaps the biggest budget of ways. There haven't been a huge number of these kind of games that have really adapted all that well. The ones that have generally do a bit of a different system. DDO, I keep coming back to this example because it's a great example of doing the conversion properly. DDO did a wonderful job, but the way DDO does it is completely different. Pretty much everything's instant, so you can essentially portion everything off and say, well, this is an adventure pack, this is an adventure pack, this is an adventure pack. The game is based around repeating the same content a couple of times at least because of the different difficulty levels, and overall there's way more content there than you actually need in order to level up. So with DDO it works quite nicely, just selling people the adventures they want to play, or alternatively subscribing and getting access to all of it. I criticized their free-to-play model in a previous Mailbox video, and in my opinion rightfully so, because I don't think they really got it. And they were giving away probably the best part of the game, which is the leveling and story content for free, and then hoping people would stick around in order to do the raids and the battlegrounds and things like that. And I don't really think that they will necessarily. That said, the argument you can make is that the subscriber base was dwindling anyway, so what the hell's the harm? Even if you bring in 10 million people and only a fraction of that actually stick around to play the Warzones, you've still actually got yourself some regular players, which is more than you had previously. Most MMOs that go free to play do show a significant increase in income, so maybe it will work out for them. One thing I will say is it's really heartening to see that they're willing to delay the free-to-play launch until they've actually got it right, or at least mostly got it right. They are listening. We will see how this ends up turning out for them. But it's always a very careful balance in this situation when you convert from subscription to free-to-play, because inherently you have to treat your free-to-play players as second-class citizens in order to make that work, but you also have to not make them feel like they're second-class citizens, otherwise they just leave and complain and whine about balance and things like that. And of course then the mighty pay-to-win comes into play, and of course that is not exactly a great term to label your game with. I'll bring you a little coverage of this perhaps when it goes live. Ghost Recon Commander, a Facebook version of the rather venerable Tom Clancy series, has been cancelled. And now you're going to ask me, why am I supposed to care about this? Well, it's bad news for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the guys behind it, Brenda Braithwaite and Tom Hall, are veterans of various very cool RPG series, including Wizardry and Anachronox. And just a couple of weeks ago, they actually closed down, quite early, a Kickstarter for an old-school RPG by the name of Shaker. Now, these guys were also heading up Ghost Recon Commander, which has now been cancelled, so they're really not having a good couple of weeks. Now, Ghost Recon Commander was supposed to be a hardcore-orientated Facebook game, and Ubisoft have pulled the plug on it, resulting in a number of unfortunate layoffs. Now, Ghost Recon Commander was supposed to be a hardcore-orientated Facebook game, and unfortunately, it seems like an awful lot of these so-called hardcore Facebook games have been meeting a rather untimely death Personally, I found it very difficult to actually enjoy any Facebook game, including Ghost Recon Commander, because even though it had a more gamey and hardcore feel, it felt just a little bit tactical in places. It also just suffered from being a really terrible video game, which is what a lot of Facebook games have a problem with. They just flat out aren't as good as regular games, and the social aspect to it doesn't really resonate with me, honestly. If I want a social aspect to a video game, I will play a traditional video game in multiplayer. Why would I need to play it on Facebook with worse graphics, poor performance, dumbed-down mechanics, and a hodgepodge of so-called social features, which more often than not involve pestering your friends for points and nonsense along those lines? I think I can only ever say that I've enjoyed, to some degree, 2 Facebook games. That was Dungeon Overlord and a game by the name of Monster Mind, which was fairly entertaining and reasonably strategic. It also had a very nice theme to it. Aside from that, that really is about it. Maybe I'm missing something. I mean, I've heard that Battle Pirates, for instance, is a very good Facebook game and has reasonable hardcore orientation, but I just don't see why I'd want to play these games on Facebook. Maybe it's just my unique situation of having access to my gaming rig pretty much 100% of the time while I'm doing my job, and maybe some people want to play these kind of games on their lunch break at work. Maybe that's the appeal of them, but to me, I don't exactly see the point. Regardless, it seems that whatever hope we had of changing the Facebook game market to be somewhat more complex, in-depth, and hardcore-orientated is rapidly disappearing as these games continue to shut down, and it's always sad news to hear about layoffs in an obviously talented studio. Exciting news for dinosaur fans. Primal Carnage has been released finally. After a fairly lengthy beta period, it is now available on Steam for $14.99 or your regional equivalent. Game launches with 10 classes, 5 maps, and, well, 1 game mode, which is sure to be just a little bit disappointing to a lot of people. There has been a promise of future DLC coming out, and according to an outro splash screen on the actual game, it claims that much of this will be free, although it's not exactly specific as to what will be free and what will not be. It simply lists free DLC, and then under that, new maps and objective-based game mode, which is perhaps the thing the game is crying out for at the moment. There have also been a number of reports on the Steam and Primal Carnage forums of performance problems as well as crash bugs. And as of the date of this recording, the game has failed to breach the top 100 when it comes to current, simultaneous, and peak players. It should be pointed out, of course, that this isn't all that uncommon for an indie title, and you can perhaps expect adoption to rise over the next few days, particularly as we come into the weekend. Keep an eye on the channel for my first impressions of Primal Carnage in its release state a little bit later on. Things continue to not look so rosy for THQ as Darksiders has sold an estimated 1 million copies, but Wedbush analyst Michael Pachter indicates that the game needs to cross the 2 million milestone in order for THQ to actually break even on the title. He went on to say that Darksiders 2's performance and a history of game delays and cancellations leaves us skeptical that THQ can successfully execute its turnaround strategy, which centers on a streamlined release slate. Now, what he means by that, of course, is the abandonment of 2 fairly high-profile projects, the Guillermo del Toro game by the name of Insane, as well as the title Devil's Third by the former Ninja Gaiden director. They also earlier this year stopped making licensed kids games, which is quite surprising because I thought that would be something of a cash cow for those guys. Then, of course, we've had the layoffs, the fact that they've shut down multiple studios, and also that they have a new president of the company. This is depressing, it really is, because THQ kind of bet the farm on this game. They put a lot of marketing dollars behind it, and it doesn't seem to have sold as well as it needs to. And it really indicates just how difficult it can be to sell something that is a fairly original IP and sell enough copies of the bloody thing in order to break even. I mean, this game was a top-selling title when it came to US retail. The month of August, when it came out, was an absolutely fantastic month for that particular title, but it still hasn't sold enough copies in order to break even and really give THQ the runaway hit that it seems that they believe that they need. This worries me greatly, of course, because THQ is also responsible for publishing various Warhammer 40,000 titles, as well as Company of Heroes 2, which still seems to be on track at the moment, but I have to wonder if they will bow to the temptation to add rather predatory business model elements into their titles in order to to break even. There's a lot of DLC coming for Darksiders 2. There are some free-to-play microtransaction elements by the looks of it when it comes to Company of Heroes 2. This is a rather sad example of a company that really stuck to the idea of traditional hardcore gaming, and yet is running into all manner of problems when it comes to making enough money in order to stay afloat. They're making big budget core games, and they're not selling enough copies in order to keep the office lights on. All I can say is, if you look at companies like Activision and EA, it's very obvious to see why. They have diversified to the point of including a lot of casual games, a lot of social gaming, and a lot of cash cow stuff, and rather interesting, quote-unquote, business models in order to stay afloat. THQ hasn't really done any of that, and they seem to be suffering as a result. I also really feel rather sad for Virgil Games, who have been doing a solid job up to this point, and yet seem to be being punished for their ideas. Best of luck to THQ, and hopefully things turn around for them in the near future. As a bit of contrast, Meteor Publishing has announced that they've closed down the second round of funding ahead of Hawken's launch, and were able to raise $18 million, which takes them to a grand total of $28.5 million in funding, which is a fairly huge amount for an indie mech game. It seems like this really drew the attention and indeed the interest of numerous investors, including Firstmark and Benchmark Capital, as well as Rustic Canyon Ventures and a Chinese firm by the name of Kongzong. These companies have been involved in gaming before. Rustic actually invested in Tryon Worlds, whereas Kongzong launched Wargaming.net's World of Tanks in China and has now acquired the license to launch Hawken over there as well. Now, just remember that this game wasn't actually developed by Meteor. Meteor Entertainment is actually a publisher, which is very odd because you probably haven't heard of them before, and that wouldn't surprise me considering that Hawken is really the only game that they've been involved in there. So the game was actually developed by Adhesive, and it just amazes me how much funding and how much momentum this game actually seems to have. I've tried it, and I enjoyed immensely what I played of it at PAX. Haven't really had a chance to dabble in the beta yet, so we'll see how that ends up turning out, but it's a really nice mix of a mech feel with a competitive FPS. It's a lot faster than something like Battletech and MechWarrior. It's more of a fusion, I think, of Western mech games with the Japanese style of mecha. The game's going full steam ahead by the looks of it. They're looking for a release on December 12th, and it's easily one of the best-looking free-to-play games I've ever seen. It's actually a beautiful PC game. It really has an awful lot of wonderful graphical assets and technologies behind it, and thankfully they've got rid of an awful lot of the film grain, which was obscuring previous versions and making the whole thing look rather ridiculous. But I'm looking forward to this one, I really am. I am intrigued to see where it goes, and that's a lot of money behind this free-to-play game. That's a scary amount, in fact. I hope it takes off, because it's an interesting-looking competitive title. And finally, we can't seem to get away from the money topic today, because Assassin's Creed 3 has multiplayer microtransactions. So-called Eredito credits are a new way of unlocking content in Assassin's Creed 3's multiplayer, so said an Ubisoft spokesperson. The quote goes on to say that people who have little time can use Eredito credits as a shortcut to unlock game items from levels 1 to 50, excluding prestige levels and relic rewards. This is not mandatory. All items sold in the Eredito credits store are also available in Abstergo credits and can be unlocked through normal progression like previous years. Listings for these credits have actually popped up on the Xbox Live Marketplace as well as the PlayStation Store, and the most expensive of which is 925 Eredito credits, costing 1,600 Microsoft points, which is about £13.60 or $20. So is this okay? It's getting to the point where an awful lot of publishers really want to double dip when it comes to selling their game. It's a case of, well, you buy the game for $60 and then we also have microtransactions. I find it difficult to object too much to it, mostly because of the fact that it is just skipping progression. But I feel that putting this stuff in very early on is a really, really bad idea. This kind of stuff should only be coming into the game a month, maybe 2, even 3 after the games come out, which allows later adopters to catch up to where everyone else is. That kind of levels the playing field just a bit. You put this in very early on, and what ends up happening is someone just buys their way to all of this stuff, and let's be honest, you're not that good at balancing. Chances are that some of this stuff is blatantly going to be overpowered in comparison to other things. So you can't really pull the whole side grade idea either. It it just doesn't seem to work out a lot of the time when it comes to games like this. Now, if you compare it to the way that Mass Effect 3 did its multiplayer, that was more of a case of buying these kind of random packs, and in that case, it seemed a little bit more reasonable. Plus the fact, of course, that Assassin's Creed 3 multiplayer is competitive, whereas Mass Effect 3's multiplayer is cooperative, so it doesn't really affect other players all that much. In fact, it actually gives them better odds if you happen to be geared up to the nines because you spent an awful lot of money getting a bunch of the premium packs in that particular game. This smells off to me, it really does. I am not keen at all on the idea of these things coming in even remotely close to the game's release. I mean, come on, this game has only just come out. It's not even out in some territories as of yet, and already, we're talking about the idea of microtransactions to buy stuff for the multiplayer. Really? If it was just cosmetic stuff, then I can kind of understand, but it's not. It seems like you can buy everything other than so-called relic rewards. You can unlock in-game items across the board. This kind of double dipping really does not sit well with me at all. Either you do a free-to-play game, or you don't. You sell everything in the box, or you do the free-to-play microtransaction model. You don't try to do both, especially when it's competitive multiplayer. If you're going to do that, then at least have the decency to wait, because if you do it 6 months to a year down the line, you can make the argument that you're providing a service to allow late adopters to catch up to the guys who are level 50 and so on and so forth. This, on the other hand, does not sit right for me at all. I guess it won't be a problem for me because this game isn't coming out for several months on PC anyway, and by that point I guess I won't really care, but for console users I feel that this is not a particularly good move at all. Alright folks, let's wrap it up with some viewer remarks, shall we? The question that I asked you yesterday was whether or not you actually enjoy modern military shooters such as Battlefield 3, Homefront, Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, and so on and so forth. And if you did, explain to me why, and if you don't, explain to me what exactly needs to change in that genre in order to make it attractive to you. Unfortunately, the response has been overwhelming, to say the least. We have too many comments to read through. It's incredibly hard to find the really good ones, because there are just so many of them. As a result, I'm going to extend this for an extra day to give some of our staff, as well as, of course, the guys over on the subreddit, the opportunity to try and contribute and sift through the comments. We're basically going to have to crowdsource this. This is way crazier than the mailbox ever was. I mean, we got a lot of emails for that, but this is ridiculous. I mean, the response has been great, so thank you very much for that, but unfortunately, you've caused us a great deal of problems. So we're going to stick with the same question, I think, for the next couple of days, and then we'll try and sift through the comments. I think that changing it from a daily question, possibly to a question every few days, might work out just a little bit better, and maybe have a discussion ranging over the course of a number of days rather than just doing it on a daily basis. The show still has a few teething problems. You probably have noticed some changes that we've made as a result of your feedback, so thank you very much for that. As regards to the aesthetic, we're going to stick with it because I like it. If we change the aesthetic now, then we piss off the guys that like it, and then of course the new aesthetic will have people that hate it as well, so it's best to be consistent, I feel, but we have made some changes which should hopefully make this just a little bit easier and more enjoyable for you to watch. Thank you very much for the support of the show thus far. We'll continue to gather your remarks on the subject of the modern military shooter, and you are able to contribute over on the subreddit if you find a comment which is particularly interesting. That does not mean it has to agree with what you say, it's going to be an interesting opinion. So you can head on over to r/cynicalbrit over on Reddit to find out more information about that. My name has been TotalBiscuit, this has been Content Patch, and I will see you next time.